Hey, what's up guys? In this video, we are going to be going over the compressor device in Ableton Live. This is the mama bear of Dynamics processors. The gate limiter and glue compressor videos have all led to this. This is very important. This device and EQ8 are, you have to understand how those work if you are going to make music with this program. They're very important in your music making journey, and they take a lifetime to understand. So don't get too hung up if you don't quite get it right away. I'm going to explain and demonstrate it the best that I can, and I've planted seeds in the previous videos, and you'll be able to have eureka moments, and you'll be able to connect the dots and all that fun stuff. So this is the compressor here. It's Mama Bear. This over here is the glue compressor, which we covered in the previous video. And I hope that you've watched the gate limiter and glue compressor videos before this. Please watch them in order because things will make a lot more, it'll make more sense. I've structured everything in such a way so that it's not overwhelming. But anyway, with this device, we have attack, release, and threshold. Attack, release, threshold. These are the most important things in any kind of dynamics control device. They kind of set the scene. But the glue compressor is, I don't want to say limited, it has a specialized use. It has a specialized use for bus and glue compression and drums, and it sounds great because there's a lot of things going on under the hood that we don't need to worry about. A lot of things, and we'll get into that in a later video. A lot of complex things, a lot of clever things have gone into this, but you don't have to worry about them. They're all under the hood. So you just have three values essentially controlling like 100 under the hood. Really confusing, complex. So let's just close that for now. This right here, you have a lot of control of a lot of those things under the hood. But the theory of operation still kind of stands. You have a threshold, which is that line, and we can see it with this readout here. Let's just compress these drums a little bit. You'll notice something, that the gain reduction is, there's already gain reduction even though it's at 0. I'm going to get into that. If you caught that right away, you're a smart cookie, and I'm happy. But let's look at this threshold here. Let's bring it down. Right, so we have the threshold going down, and we have our gain reduction. There's gain reduction. Threshold should be understood, but if you notice something with your ears, you'll notice that we don't need to increase the volume or the gain after our compression kind of situation there. Let's look at this glue compressor here. Let's do the same thing. Right, we bring the threshold down, the volume goes down. We have to give it a little bit of makeup gain to bring it back up. We don't need to do that with the compressor here because it has a nifty little feature called makeup gain, automatic makeup gain. What this does is this will essentially compensate for the gain reduction that you're doing, and it will keep it the same kind of volume depending on the ratio and the threshold. So we can bring this down, turn it on and off. So with it off, it'll behave like we kind of expected. We can adjust the attack as well. Make it punchy, make it squishy, and all those things. So why would you use this? Well, again, it's a lot more flexible, and you can dial in things for different source material. The glue compressor is very specialized. I'm not going to say it's limited, but it's specialized. It's for buses. It's for gluing a bunch of sounds together. It has a use. It's modeled after a piece of dinosaur equipment. So, you know, it's faithful to how that equipment behaved. And we have the attack, which is in steps. We can't go in between 1 millisecond and 3 milliseconds. So there's not a whole lot of flexibility, relatively speaking, and all those things. And the ratio, you can only set it to 2, 4, and 10. We'll get into that in a little bit. It's not, it's not as flexible as the compressor can be with a variable attack from 0.01 milliseconds all the way to 1 second. So that's exciting. And the release can be 1 millisecond to 3 milliseconds. No, sorry, 3 seconds. So you can get a wide variety of, I guess, compressor types, flavors. Because in the real world, there are different kinds of compressor architectures. There's like the VCA, and there's opto, and there's tube, and they all react differently on the audio. So let's look at this. There's attack and release and threshold. We should really understand that by now, right? The attack is the reaction time after the audio goes above the threshold. So let's investigate this. So I didn't want to keep you in suspense for too long, but the threshold here is set to 0. We play the sound. There's already gain reduction. What the heck's going on there? Well, I'm going to go into the next view, and I'm going to show you kind of what's going on. And I'm not going to get totally into it, but we're going to go into the transfer curve view. So right now, we're in the collapsed view, and we can switch between them with these 3 buttons here. This is the basic one. There's threshold, gain reduction, and output. So we have the audio coming in with the threshold. We have the gain reduction showing us how much we're reducing the volume, or the amplitude, I should say. And then the output here is the output. So we can see it's a little bit lower, obviously, because, we're reducing the gain. And we can see that, and that's very well understood. Input, output. We can see what's going in, what the effect we're placing upon it, and the output. And we can adjust all these things to our heart's content. Let's go into the next view, which is the transfer curve view. So I'm going to do a thing. Don't look at that. Okay, so this is a different view, but it's showing us in a graph what is occurring, right? So nothing changed. It's just a different view, right? We still have the threshold in this slider here. We still have the output, and we have access to seeing the gain reduction. But what the heck is going on here? Well, this is the transfer curve, and it's showing us what is happening after the audio goes above the threshold, right? And we can kind of change that behavior with our ratio. So the ratio is very important to kind of understand. So if this graph was diagonal, like so, I'll just draw that in. So that is diagonal. The audio, in terms of its energy, before it gets to the threshold is around here, right? Everything below the threshold is right here, and we can see that, right? We can adjust that. This yellow thing is the threshold amount, and I promise you you'll get this. Don't worry about it. But this yellow ball is the threshold. So what happens after the threshold? Well, you have some gain reduction. How much gain reduction? And how much gain reduction if it's 1 dB over the threshold compared to 10 dB over the threshold? What's going on? So this is what this curve is telling us. So let's look at our first ratio. We'll set the ratio here. So a ratio is, a value between a number and 1. So I'll set this to 1 to 1. So what happens now is if the audio amplitude if anything goes above the threshold, nothing happens, right? Because the curve is very straight, much like it was, and I can prove that. Nothing is happening, right? So this is basically saying for every 1 dB over, basically have it set to 1 on the output, 2 to 2 on the output. It's a ratio, 1 to 1. Hopefully I'm explaining that correctly. If we increase the ratio, let's say 2 to 1, right? This will say, okay, so things kind of a little bit over the threshold, compress it. But as we get more over the threshold, like just compress it a little bit more. I hope this is making sense. I don't want to get totally into the math of it or get deep into the explanation. I'm just going to say that the ratio dictates the aggressiveness of the compression. So the compression, if we have it to infinity to 1, it is a brick wall. Nothing will go above that. Right, we're getting some hefty gain reduction there. Right, even with a fast attack, this is essentially limiting. Right, so you can see that little ball bouncing around there. That is where the kind of the amplitude is around the threshold cutoff. That's the gain reduction. We can see the gain reduction and that ball are somewhat connected. Right, so that's very aggressive compression. If we wanted to ease off, we can adjust that curve there, or that angle. I shouldn't say curve because we're not there yet. All the way to 1 to 1 where nothing's going to happen. So keep that in mind. I'm going to be doing a more advanced course. I'm trying not to overwhelm or confuse, but just think of the ratio adjusting the aggressiveness of the compression once it goes above the threshold. So things just a little bit over the threshold, won't be compressed as much. Things over will be, like if they're like a lot a bit over the threshold, they'll get compressed more. It's the aggression. So this right here is it's very linear. It goes do and then boom, stops and then goes straight that way. It's very linear. There's something called a knee. Okay, so let's look at that again. Let's go to 0, 0. Right, we're getting no gain reduction, but we were over here. Remember, we're getting some gain reduction, and it wasn't even close. It wasn't going over the threshold. That's because the knee was on, right? And the knee is essentially, as we approach the threshold, there will be some gain reduction. You don't have to go over the threshold for there to be gain reduction. You just kind of have to get close, and we can see that. I'm going to get rid of that right there. Let's look at this. You'll notice that it's kind of curved. We're curving it. And I'll make it more exaggerated there. So that's pretty curved now. It's not like a freaking angle. It's more curved. And these lines here, show you. This part and this part are it's like the I guess the tolerance area between, the threshold that things will act upon it. So as the amplitude approaches the threshold, nothing's going to happen. And then once it approaches this, which can be, far below, then we start to get some gain reduction. And after the threshold, it won't get into like full aggressive compression until a little bit after. So essentially, this will give us some smoothness to how the compressor compresses and how it behaves. And this is a lot like how kind of retro vintage gear works, right? Digital works like that. That is digital. It's either it's above the threshold or not, like ones and zeros, right? But with vintage gear, and this is what's happening under the hood in the glue compressor, 100%. Like analog stuff, transparent stuff, that's how it behaves. I'll give you an example of what that sounds like. Right? Kind of subtle, kind of not, but we can make that like a really wide curve. This is called the knee, and this is like super gentle. Right, that makeup adjusted that too. It depends on the ratio there. Right, and that is transparency. Trying to make it really obvious. Right, that should be it. Right, it's either squished or not. Here it's more gentle. Right, so you can dial in a bunch of things, and that is the transfer curve view. And I'm going to get into this in a later video, but this is essentially how you would control how it behaves as it is approaching the threshold cutoff. So with the knee at 0, it'll behave kind of like how you expect it, right? And oh yeah, I'm doing that, so I'm moving it a little bit. But yeah, this kind of like, okay, goes over this, compress, but the knee will adjust it, and you can see that variance right there. So that's all well and good. Okay, let's look at the other view, the last view. This is the activity view, and what the heck is this? Let me just reset this. We'll drop that back in. We'll go back over here. So let's look at this. This is a readout, and there's the threshold and then the output, and the gain reduction is displayed in this time domain graph here. So let's bring the threshold down. Oh look, that's that imaginary line that I was drawing on everything in the last couple of videos. This is the threshold line. We can see things going above the threshold, and then that yellow line is the gain reduction. Isn't that fascinating? We can visually see the gain reduction over time, and we can adjust the release. We can see all these really cool things. We can get the ratio going on. And we can see what's going on in terms of the gain reduction. Very, very useful. So we have, let's say, these drums. I want you to notice the curve or the release, right? You can see that when it goes down, that's the attack. And we can adjust that. Right? See, it's getting like more laggy. Right? I can make it faster. It's more instantaneous, and there's more gain reduction going on. Obviously, I can make it slower, and things can poke through in the beginning of the sound that is affecting the after the audio goes above the threshold, the attack is how fast it has, the time it takes for it to react, essentially. getting all tongue-tied here. We can see the release, and we can see it like, you know, with a long release, we can go like 3 seconds. Look how long that takes. And that would be for, I guess, score and orchestral. It's there if you need it. It's very flexible. But we'll notice that it's kind of curved in its orientation. And that is how real compressors work. They work logarithmically. If we wanted to change that, we can select linear. And now they're kind of more, I guess, straight lines. Right? And we can see that little curve there. That is because of the knee. Right? Now we can see it. Hope you can see it. I wish you could freeze that. But you could see that it just snaps back, right? At the end there. But if we, again, increase the knee, which is, it's still being affected after the threshold, you can see it like more curved that way. But let's just set it to 0. We can see the linear aspect of that. It's kind of very fast. That is it's digital, and it doesn't sound that great. You want it to be smooth. For the most part. I'm not saying that you should, but it's there if you need it. Like if your drums are sounding weird, a lot of compressors don't behave that way. They operate in a logarithmic mode. And it says right here, sharply compressed peaks will have faster release times than less compressed material. Smoother and less noticeable compression than linear mode. Just gives you more transparency. We covered what transparency is in the limiter video. So we have the gain reduction. We can see the gain reduction. We can also just see the output. But that's not, in my opinion, that's not very useful. I like to see the gain reduction over time when we can, see what's going on there. We also, much like the limiter, we have look ahead. Look ahead is in the limiter. The limiter is a very specialized compressor. We have it here as well. And let's just go 10 milliseconds. Very fast attack. You need look ahead to catch very high, very fast, high frequency peaks. And what this can do is it can make sure that you again, catch all those peaks at the beginning. I went over this in the limiter video. You can do automatic release as well. Right, it's kind of coming through to begin with it at 0. We can give it 1 millisecond. Right, and it's there if you need it. So all these things together is what goes into compression. Very, very important. So let's take a look at I can move the threshold up and down. It's like the magical line I've been talking about. Let's keep the knee at 0, right, which is very linear. But let's look at what's being fed into the threshold, because up until now, it's been the peak. It's been like what we've kind of been seeing. Like it's just momentary, right? So any point in time, it measures whether or not the audio has gone above the threshold. So what if you could change that? What if you could maybe take an average of that so it's more smooth, so it doesn't react fast to material like this. It kind of rides the audio in a pleasing way. And that's done with RMS. RMS is a different thing, a different way of what is being detected by the threshold, or what I like to call it the detection circuit. Right, and this is more smooth. Right, it's kind of averaging. I'm going to take off the makeup gain. Right, it's very smooth as opposed to the peak. Right, we're we're still getting gain reduction, but it's windowing it and it's taking an average, and this is more, it's more appropriate to how we measure loudness. RMS is a completely different video. I'm sure you can look up, there's a really good Wikipedia article on it. Root mean square. It's essentially the average of a incoming signal as opposed to the momentary peak. And RMS is very useful because it can emulate like retro equipment, and and it makes it less sensitive to short peaks, and it responds. So let's look at what it would respond to. It would respond to the kick more than the hi-hats. The hi-hats are very quick, right? The hi-hats are very quick, but the kick is very like rounded, so it'll compress that kick more than say the hi-hats or the snare. Every sound has a duration, and the RMS might work for your music material in question. The peak doesn't care, so it just kind of affects everything. Right, so listen to those hi-hats as opposed to the peak. Right, we're still getting compression, we're still making it a little bit louder, but it sounds more natural, sounds more transparent. And when we mix the RMS with the knee, and a, maybe, around 4-to-1, maybe try linear. No, that's a little bit too much. See, different ones are appropriate. Right? Sounds really cool. So there's that. There's another mode, and that is the expand mode. And this is really fun. So let's look at that. The expand, when audio goes above the when it goes above the threshold, it will reduce the volume. With expand, it will boost the volume. You'll notice something, that the ratio changes. And this will dictate, how much it gets expanded as you as you go above the threshold. So you want the important things in question to go above the threshold. And we can see the gain reduction value. It's not actually gain reduction, it's gain increasing. Look at that. So what that is doing is that is making it more punchy while maintaining the overall body of it. This is called transient shaping. It's called a bunch of other things, but this is very neat. And it's kind of like the reverse, or like inverting the gate. You kind of have to wrap your head around working in a different way. Right, so the attack won't do much of it. You want to have the attack really fast because you want those transients to be caught. The ratio will increase, how much it is expanded as it goes above the threshold. So that's pretty neat. And the release will dictate how long it takes for it to settle back down. And we can adjust the knee as well. Right? So it'll be expanded before it approaches. Like, look at that. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny looking? So it's inverted, which is pretty neat, right? So there's that. And the gain reduction has changed to purple. Right. So we can make it more gentle with a gentle knee and give it more of a release there. Get the output down. And this is another way to make your sound more punchy. Right, so it's a different way of working. And we also have the wet dry, so we can have a very heavily compressed signal and mix it in with the dry, much like we did with the glue compressor. I'm going to get into this in more of an advanced kind of compressor video. I just wanted to kind of plant seeds. I promise I'll go over, this should be very well understood. I don't think I explained it. No, I explained it okay, I think, for people, first looking at this. It's just a visual readout of what is occurring after and before the threshold point here. So don't worry about that. Just, yeah, it's a lifelong journey, and we're going to be covering all these in more detail in the coming videos. And obviously, I have a bunch of videos that cover this in more detail with external VSTs, but that is beyond the scope of this video. But yeah, check things out, and I hope you enjoyed, hope you learned stuff. Take care, and have a good one.